Last Sunday, I was at my boyfriend's apartment for the weekend. My boyfriend left to go to work at about 8 a.m., but not before touching my ass and giving me a kiss on the head. This woke me up, but by the time I could open my eyes, he was already out the door. He forgot to lock the apartment door on his way out, to which I had not realized. I got up, put my contacts in, brushed my teeth, and put my workout clothes on, starting my day off right with some squats and crunches. I then make myself some coffee and toast, hop on the computer to look up hotels and restaurants my boyfriend and I could go to on our little in-state vacation. The entry door leads directly to the open kitchen and living room area, which is where his computer is. I hear the door handle turning and get excited thinking my boyfriend's coming home for an early lunch. The door quickly opens and an older man in his 60s or 70s steps in. My first thought is maybe he's the electrician that the landlord said would be stopping by, but how odd he didn't even knock or... oh, he's not even wearing any pants. Luckily he was wearing underwear. This guy speed-walked into the apartment with such a glossed-over look. I was mostly polite in the beginning, saying, "Sir, who are you? What are you doing here? This isn't your apartment." I progressively began shouting and cussing him out, but nothing would faze him. He went straight to the dining table and over to a large cardboard box that my boyfriend had full of board games. He sat on them. He sat on the games. It looked like he was going to take a shit on them, but then he tried laying down on the games. I got up and ran to the bathroom, scared for my safety as I'm only 5'2", and definitely not as strong as I like to think I am. This guy was about 6 foot, and on God knows how many drugs. I dialed 911 and informed the operator of everything that has happened as I'm shaking. She asked if I'd be able to safely leave the bathroom to let the police in. I said, "Oh, no need, it's unlocked, as that's how the guy got in," and gave a little laugh. She laughed too. I heard the cops at the door, but they were talking to each other. I opened the bathroom door and peeked into the living room. I couldn't see the guy anymore. I was nervous about checking the bathroom because I'd have to go around a corner and wouldn't be able to see very well. Suddenly I hear, "Sir, where are your pants?" from the hallway. I'm standing right at the door to be able to listen, and I'm texting my boyfriend everything that's just happened. They had the guy in cuffs, and the guy kept shouting they were hurting his hands. The officers asked him where he lives and what he's doing here. The guy said where he lives, which is 7 streets away, and he's trying to go to bed. I'm sorry, not here, my man. My boyfriend came home shortly after and comforted me. We went downstairs to see if the police needed my statement before they took off with the guy. They said no. We've already got it from 3 other people. We found out that he went into every unlocked apartment he could. An officer walked by with a gallon Ziploc bag full of pill bottles. We found his pants and shoes in the hallway. Lock your doors, folks. This might not be so creepy to the general public, but it definitely made me nervous at the time. When I was 12 years old, in 2007, I was home alone babysitting my 2 younger siblings while my parents were out at an event. It was summertime, so it stayed light out for a while into the evening. Just as it was starting to get dark, I went into the kitchen to make a bowl of popcorn to watch a movie with my brother and sister. When I looked out the kitchen window, I saw that there was a car parked hiding in the tree line of our yard. For context, we live in a fairly rural place, and we rarely had people out our direction unless they lived down our gravel road, and we knew our neighbors' cars. This was a junky beater, and the license plate had been taped over. It was not one of our neighbors. I was a kid who was pretty aware of my surroundings, and I decided to step back from the big kitchen window and go into the dark entryway hall to get a better look. There was just a single man sitting in it, staring directly at the house with the lights off. Immediately, I locked the front and back door. I told my little brother and sister calmly to play in their room and not to come out until I came and got them for movie night. I then went back to the kitchen to get the phone to call my mom, but she didn't answer. I watched him through the curtains sit in the dark tree line and stare at the house for what felt like ages. Finally, someone drove down our road and their headlights reflected off the car. He started the engine, drove out of the trees, and booked it down the gravel. I was still very nervous and tried calling my mom again. No answer. So for the rest of the time, I just played with my siblings in their room with the door shut and curtains pulled until my parents came home later that night. When I tried telling my parents what had happened, they were convinced I was making it up and that I was being a dramatic kid. I swore up and down I saw this car with blacked out plates in the tree line, and they weren't interested at all. I know I saw it, but I'm the only one who did. Maybe it was just a random guy who didn't know there were 3 young kids home alone, hiding for some other reason. But I'm still glad that I locked all the doors. Reason number 478, why women pick the bear. Yesterday, I really needed some me time. I took my paddleboard out to a local lake and paddled to my favorite spot, a large open field, no houses, and a no-wake area, so usually private with no boats, and I get a beautiful view of the sunset. It's the perfect spot for me to practice yoga on my board. And let me say, I get that this may be fascinating to some people, but to 2 extremely creepy men who quietly snuck their boat up uncomfortably close and sat watching me for God knows how long, thanks for ruining my peace. These men weren't fishing, and they weren't even where motored boats are supposed to be. They were just staring. I gave them the benefit of the doubt and continued stretching, in mindful ways as to not provide some creeps a peep show, and they just continued to watch. I offered a friendly wave so they knew I saw them, and to gauge how creepy they were, and they didn't smile. They just kept staring. At this point, I give up. I'm creeped out and honestly paranoid, so I start paddling back to shore. They come up beside me slowly again, just staring. Again I smile uncomfortably. Nothing. These weirdos even go as far as turning their heads towards me as they pass. What in the actual fuck? I have no idea what their intent was. I can only assume they are creeps with no social skills whatsoever. But they totally ruined my evening, and I will now be bringing a waterproof pouch with my phone when I paddle alone for safety. Yes, I know I'm paranoid. Real experiences have made me this way. Women deal with all kinds of crazy things like this, and far worse. It's why we're supposed to keep our keys clutched in our fist when walking in a parking lot, and not leave our drinks unattended. And it's bullshit. People who stare may seem relatively harmless, but as a woman, we have to be on guard all the time. Especially if you enjoy solo travel. It's exhausting. This happened over 10 years back, and I hadn't thought about it much until a few similar posts jogged my memory, so I thought I'd share it now. My boyfriend, now husband, and myself had recently moved into our first place together, and we were still settling in after a month or two. It was a large suite in an older high-rise building that was attached to 3 other buildings in the same complex via an attached underground area which included a gym, some stores, and a pub. Really weird, but a lot of the tenants were long-timers and frequented the businesses down there since it was convenient. All buildings also shared on-site security, located in the same weird underground lair. We had nothing to compare it to, but looking back on it, the place was really weird, and there were some minor red flags before we even moved in. When we first met the building manager to view the place, we couldn't view the actual unit because the current tenant wouldn't allow the manager into the suite. She showed us the identical unit 1 floor down and assured us the lock would be changed, all carpets would be replaced, and that the place would be painted. So we didn't need to worry about any damage or anything. I would never move into a place sight unseen now, but at the time, we were young and dumb and just wanted to get out of our parents' houses. So we agreed and arranged to move in. Luckily, the place was really nice and in good shape when we moved in, so that didn't end up being a problem. The suite itself was great, but the other tenants on our floor were really odd. Most of them had lived there for years and didn't leave their apartments much and weren't particularly friendly. The guy next door was around our age, but played EDM 24 hours a day at full blast. How he slept, I'll never know. So we often had security pounding on our door for misdirected noise complaints. It turned out that was about all security was there for, as they came up a lot due to complaints from the units below us. I don't think it was even once due to us making noise, but who knows? The building manager was also really weird and always up in everyone's business. She patrolled the hallways daily and asked really personal questions, then acted offended if you didn't want to answer them. She was another one who lived there forever and was a bit drunk on building manager power or something. In general, the vibe was awkward there. We both worked jobs at the time that had us starting early in the morning and finishing up work in the early afternoon, and this day was no different. We were both home by 3 p.m. and hanging out in the apartment watching TV. I watched and read a lot of scary shit, and I am a bit paranoid, so I always made it a habit to lock both the deadbolt and security chain from the inside of the front door when we were both at home. This day was no exception. Eventually, our late afternoon TV watching shifted into early evening sex, and afterwards, we both drifted off since we had woken up so early for work that day. I was in and out of sleep, so the background noise of the apartment was slipping in and out of my consciousness. I could hear the TV every so often, and at one point I stirred awake because I could have sworn I heard the sound of the door unlocking. I glanced in the direction of the door once I opened my eyes, but it looked closed, and I didn't hear any further noises like knocking or anyone in the hallway. I figured I must have heard something on the television rather than in the apartment, and I fell back asleep. We both woke up about an hour later, and my boyfriend mentioned that he woke up at one point because he could have sworn he heard someone trying to get into the apartment. This seemed way too weird to be a coincidence, so we both got up to examine the door and see what the noise could have been. Someone had indeed unlocked the door. The deadbolt was unlocked, even though we both saw that it was locked that afternoon after I got home, and the door was propped open on the frame, resting against the security chain, which was still secured. This spooked us both, since whoever it was obviously had a key, yet didn't knock or announce their presence before trying to enter the unit. They also didn't try to cover up the fact that they tried to come in, as it was really obvious that they had tried to gain access but couldn't. That part bothered me the most, because I wondered what would happen if they tried again and we weren't home. or maybe if they'd been inside already prior to that day. We never found out who it was, and to this day, we have no idea if they tried to gain access at any other point. Nothing ever seemed out of place or removed, so it's impossible to know for sure. We lived there for almost 2 years afterwards, and didn't have another experience like this one. Plenty of other weird and annoying ones, but none this creepy. The only people who should have had copies of the keys to our unit would be the building manager and possibly security or maintenance workers, but any of those individuals should have announced their presence and notified us if they needed to come into our unit. They always had in the past, so no reason to think this situation should be any different. And no one knocked later that night or any other day that week or the next, which I would expect if one of those parties needed something from us or access to our unit. The only other theory I have is that maybe it was the weird former tenant who still had the keys to the place if the manager was dishonest about changing the locks. Or maybe the guy made extra copies or something. I have no clue why he'd come back, and that seems like the most far-fetched explanation, but it is also the creepiest. I wish I knew, since it still bugs me that we never figured this mystery out before we moved. Whoever it was, we were all lucky the security chain was secured that day, or that would have been a very awkward and nudity-filled home invasion. This just happened to me like 30 minutes ago, so I'm still rather shaken up. A friend and I were walking down the street back to my apartment. It was dark out since it was late. As we were walking on the sidewalk past a dark parking lot, a woman approached us out of the shadows. She was waiting there for us to approach her, so I thought it was strange. There was also another woman walking alone about half a block ahead of us that passed by her. I want to mention that she didn't stop this woman. She stops us by looking me in the eye and saying, "Excuse me, I think you're so beautiful, and I want to know your name." I thought this was weird, so my friend and I look at each other, and both said, She said, "I promise I'm not being weird." Still, we didn't answer her and just kind of stood there in shock. The woman got more urgent with her pleas and said, "Please, I just really want to know your name." And finally, I kind of snapped out of it and said, "No, thank you." And then we walked away. I turned back to see where she went because I got such a bad gut feeling about this, and I saw her talking to a man in a car across the street. They both were looking at us. She then got into the car, and they sped off. Here's what I think happened. The man, with the woman in tow, was on the prowl to find a woman to traffic. They saw us walking from way down the street, and then drove up the street to try to get into position before we walked over there. We didn't notice because it was dark. There are lots of trees, and the street is long. He told her to try to get me in the car, and she tried to, but failed. Do you guys think that this might have been a sex trafficking scheme to try to get us into the car? Why would she be so urgent and aggressive about my name? What was the man doing there? Should I be worried that they might come back? I live about a block from there, and I'm so scared. Okay, so back when I was in the military, I was based out in California. This was pretty much right at the start of the housing bust, and I found myself newly divorced following a deployment. As such, I could no longer live on base and had to move. I quickly discovered that it now was the same price or cheaper to rent a house instead of an apartment off base, so I got in touch with a realtor who worked with residents of a local gated community. As a newly single female with zero family in the area, I thought extra security could only be a good thing. I soon found the perfect house. It was amazing. Had a wraparound porch with a view of the lake in the center of the community. Had trees blocking my view of my neighbors and an awesome kitchen. I love cooking, by the way. It had tons of local wildlife. I could easily see myself recovering from what had been an ungodly rough year. The owner mostly lived overseas, so I never really dealt with him except when I moved in, but he seemed very nice, if a bit particular. He obviously loved the house, so I didn't think much of that. The 2 times I needed something looked after, his brother came to deal with them as he was a handyman of sorts. I always found it a bit weird that him and his brother looked like they could have been twins, to the point where I thought his brother was him when he came to pick up the dryer when it needed fixing. And I mean literally. He came and picked it up and carried it out in his arms. Funny thing about PTSD brain, though, is that lots of normal things seem weird while strange things seem normal. So I never really thought of the landlord-brother situation as odd until after. Maybe it was normal, and the whole oddness of what happened is setting off my paranoia. I don't really know, but yeah. The landlord was odd. His brother was apparently the Hulk, but spoke to me like I was their kid who needed very strict instructions. Anyway, I enjoyed my time in the house. My emotional support pup loved it too, because the next-door neighbors had dogs for her to play with. But my PTSD and other mental health issues had me on a path headed straight for a medical separation. But then the president issued a series of rollback programs, a chance for military members to separate ahead of contract in anticipation for the Middle Eastern conflicts to be abandoned, and my commander highly suggested, if you're military, you know this basically means do this or else, for me to take the early separation. There were a few reasons surrounding this, but the main was that Squadron knew they were the reason I was mentally fucked up, and there were more than a few of the people who had it in for me still at the clinic I was assigned to. Those people kept writing me up for things no one else got written up for. Examples of this: accidentally jamming the shredder that jammed at least once a week, leaving the front desk unattended while I was having an anaphylactic attack, having a panic attack which left work unattended because I was literally curled into a ball in the corner. You get the picture. Of course, my brain took most of this stuff at face value and figured it was okay and I deserved it. But my commander was trying to protect me as best as she could and get me out of a clearly hostile work environment ASAP. So I applied and was approved for separation. Now, this meant I was leaving my lease before the year was out. I forget if my landlord just decided to be nice, or if I had to pull out a law about military members being entitled to early release from a lease when their duty assignments change. Probably the second one, because he wasn't happy. I didn't really have the mental capacity to care too much about putting him out though, because my scrambled brains all of a sudden had a lot of military paperwork and processing to deal with. Not to mention the fact that the whole idea that I was separating felt very surreal in the first place. I'd always thought I'd be a lifer. I didn't tell any of my neighbors I was moving. Only one of my friends knew exactly when I was moving out, and even my movers didn't know exactly when, because I stayed there on an air mattress for about a week after they picked up my things. I was camping my way across country on my way home, so I had a lot of stuff to move in my car too. To the best of my knowledge, no one on the base knew exactly when my house would be vacant either, because I actually stayed in a motel off base for a few days after I moved out, just to make the final days of last-minute paperwork easier. The house was about 40 minutes from my base, while the motel was 10. They knew what my travel plans were. I was on separation leave for that time, which meant I was technically still in the military, and they needed to know exactly where I was. But I had marked my starting location for the trip as my base, not the house. What you should be getting out of this is that only 2 people for sure knew the exact date I was leaving my house: my friend and my landlord. He'd likely told his brother and his realtor as well, but I'm not too sure about that. That said, even my landlord didn't know the exact date I'd be leaving the area, just when I'd vacate the premises. My landlord had told me to drop my house keys in the realtor's mailbox, so that's what I did. And a few days later, I'd left on my road trip home. Now, about a day later, I get a phone call from my landlord. I'm on the road with my pup when I answer. The conversation is as follows. "Hey, you left your camera here," my landlord told me. "Are you sure?" I replied. "Yeah, it's a Nikon with a nice set of lenses and a camera bag," he continues. "Oh, I don't have one of those," I told him. "Really? My brother said you did," he went on. I try to think back, and I remember his brother coming over to drop off the dryer while my sister and nephew were in town. She's an avid photographer, and I figure she must have had the camera bag out in preparation for our day trip to San Francisco. "No, I only own one of those Canons that you can fit in your pocket." He must be thinking of my sister, but she for sure brought that home with her months ago. The landlord was silent for a while before he spoke. "Well, what about this sleeping bag that's here?" "No, I definitely have my sleeping bag," I told him. The landlord again describes my sleeping bag exactly. "No, I have mine. I slept in it last night. I'd stayed at a campsite, so I knew I had it." The landlord is quiet again before answering. "There's a backpack too, with a few random items." His tone changes to accusatory. "Did you tell one of your friends you could stay here for the rest of your lease?" he asks. "No, only one of my friends knows exactly when I moved out, and he's visiting his wife who's deployed in Korea right now." "Well, someone's been living here," he tells me. At this point, it should have occurred to me how weird it was that he'd gone from friendly, "Hey, you forgot this," to angry, "You let someone squat here," so quickly. But it was only just getting through my head that someone had clearly moved in the moment I moved out. This house didn't have an attic, so this couldn't have been one of those "someone was living in the attic while I was living there and moved down into the main house later" situations. There wasn't a sealed-off part of the house where this could be done, and I even went into the basement on a regular basis. It's possible someone was living in the woods behind the house, but I have no idea. Anyway, my landlord wanted me to come over and check the stuff to make sure it wasn't mine. I told him that I'd finished up my paperwork, so I was on the road and already in Oregon. He clearly hadn't expected me to already have left the area since I still had a few days on my lease. Yes, it should have struck me as weird that he was already in the house, but I figured he'd picked up the keys and knew I was out. He told me he'd have to call me back after he figured things out. He never called back. I texted him later to follow up, but all I got was short/no responses to my questions. No, they didn't know whose stuff it was. No answer when I told him I was freaked out and wanted to know what had happened. Yes, he'd gotten both sets of keys from the realtor. No, he hadn't found anything else. Not long after, I got my full deposit back, which I hadn't been expecting since I felt bad for not staying my whole lease. I hadn't planned on asking for it. It wasn't until relaying this all to my mom later that I realized exactly how weird the whole thing was, or that my landlord might have been making up the squatter. She pointed out how strange it was that a guy who was supposedly traveling too much to use his own house would show up himself to walk through the house after I left, especially since his brother did everything while I lived there. Neither of us are really sure if he was up to something, or if there really had been some extremely creepy stalker/squatter situation. Either way, the whole thing seriously messed with my already messed up head. I worked as a PSW on the night shift at a long-term care home. I had a resident bell ring at 2:59 a.m. I went in and asked her what she needed, and she proceeded to yell at me that there was a man in her bathroom and that I needed to get him out. We had people who would wander into others' rooms, so I asked her what the man looked like, and she said that he was a black figure and he had no face. I calmed her down and then told whoever was in the bathroom that they had to leave her alone. I then went back to my charting. Around 3:10, I had another call bell ring, but from the other side of the floor from where the first bell went off. I went into this resident's room. This particular resident would ask for pain meds at around this time. I asked if he needed meds. He told me, and I quote, "There's a creepy man in my room with no face. You need to get him out." My blood ran cold, and I had a nurse stay with me on the floor for the rest of my shift. I do have more stories if anyone wants to hear them. There is this street dog near my college campus that I see every day. It's one of the older dogs, so it's always sleeping and very calm in general. I live very near to the college, and my friend and I usually go for a walk late at night after dinner. Tonight was no different, and we were walking around the same route. It's a residential area, so we have never felt unsafe since there are always college students or other families out on the road walking around. We were on our third lap, and this dog was sitting at its usual spot. While we were walking past it, I was gushing about how cute it was and was generally distracted. Suddenly, my friend said that there was a weird car behind us. I turned around to see that there was in fact a car driving at a really slow speed. The car pivoted towards us, which made me think that maybe it wanted to park where we were walking and might just be a random family only. As I was about to convey these assumptions to my friend, we hear a dog barking and turn around to see it chasing after the car. Both my friend and I are scared of dogs, so she stood behind me hoping I would save her. But right when I turned around, it was the same street dog. I knew right away it wouldn't harm us. The car suddenly sped past us, and the dog didn't chase us or anything. Instead, it just stood on guard. When we recovered from the shock of it all, we both had the same realization that the dog might have just saved us. We still don't know if that car had any evil intentions, but the way it sped right when the dog started barking, the timing of it all was way too bizarre. Plus, it was driving so slow that both of us didn't even realize until it was way too close to us. Needless to say, that dog will be getting extra pets from me every time I see it. This was back in 2015. I'm a male, and I was 16 years old at the time. This was in summer, where both my parents went to visit some relatives from out of town. They wouldn't be home for 3 days. I was the only child, and I was the only one left in the house. My grandma did visit me every single day to make me lunch, but of course she didn't stay during the night. That's when I went wild. watching movies, gaming, watching YouTube. Everything you could picture a 16-year-old doing when his parents aren't home. So the second night, I was watching a movie and I ran out of chips. I paused the movie and went down in the kitchen to grab some more. I then hear a window break and a door opening. The kitchen was separate from the living room where the door was opened. I grabbed a knife and slowly peeked my head around. And there he was, a tall man, about 6 foot. He had a baseball cap, some old jacket, probably leather. It was torn on the right sleeve. My phone was in the room upstairs. He was going through the shelf next to the door very loudly. I somehow managed to get to the stairs. He turned around and realized I was there. Out of fear, I guess, I screamed and threw the knife at him. I missed him, but I hit the wall beside his head, and the knife got lodged in there. I guess he was scared by this and my savage screaming, and the throw I just made. He ran out before I could grab another knife. Yes, I ran back to get another one. Adrenaline is one hell of a drug. When I saw that he left, I ran to my room and called the police. They came quickly and just took fingerprints and any DNA samples they could find. The next morning, I called my parents, and they came back around noon. I don't know why, but I kept the knife lodged into the wall next to the door. So the first question they asked me is, why is there a knife in the wall? We changed the front door with a more heavy-duty one. They arrested the guy within the same week. One of the cops told me that the guy was thinking I was going to kill him and tried to call the police on an attempted murder. So, I guess the moral of the story is hide when someone is robbing your house, or maybe learn to act like a maniac. I love to share a story my uncle told me. In 1992, he owned about 150 acres in a remote area of East Tennessee. On this land, he had a large fishing pond and a stream running through it, and he used to leave lines out at night to pull in big catfish. This pond was accessible by 2 small game trails through thick patches of woods, and he would need to drive to the trail entrances from his house near the front of the property and walk about half a mile in his gear and nothing but a headlamp for light. This was something he did pretty often, and my uncle was a lover of the outdoors, so this was business as usual for him, Vietnam vet as well. Anyway, this particular night in July 1992, he went down to the pond at about 9:30 p.m. to check his lines. As he was doing so, he heard a loud splash and assumed it was a fish jumping. He carried on with what he was doing, and then heard a low, guttural groan, and what he describes as monkeys fighting just on the other side of the pond. It was about 70 yards across. Multiple loud splashes occurred, and he also heard a loud crash in the woods just yards away to his left. He talked about how he immediately felt a sense of panic and was attempting to get visuals using his headlamp, but whatever was producing these sounds was behind tree cover. He said that the woods then erupted in continued sounds of fighting monkeys, and he opted to drop his gear and run down the trail toward his truck. Apparently, even in his adrenaline-fueled state, he could hear footfall on his left as he was being hunted. He got to his truck and hauled ass out of there to the road and back to his home, which, mind you, sits on the property about 6 miles away. He went inside and locked every window and door, grabbed a gun, and stayed up and vigilant the entire night. But nothing more occurred. He called my dad the next day, who sort of just laughed it off. Well, for my uncle, whatever he experienced scared him so badly that he put his land up for sale and sold it a few months later. Until he died in 2017, he would maintain that he believes that he walked into a group of Sasquatch and they erupted in territorial displays to get him out of there. He never enjoyed the outdoors after that. This wasn't a man who I took for a liar. Back in 2016, I was living with my then boyfriend's family in their home in Melbourne, Australia. Each morning I would wake up and be the only one home. On this particular morning, I woke up to loud banging and clashing at the backside of the house. I decided to ring my boyfriend's mom just to make sure it wasn't her and that it was nothing to worry about. Unfortunately for me, she didn't answer my phone call. Out of curiosity, I peeked through the blinds of my bedroom. My bedroom backed onto the back of the house. I happened to see the top of someone's head, or what seemed to be a gray beanie. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my boyfriend's mom. She wasn't home and wasn't sure what the banging was. I asked her if her daughter could possibly have forgotten her keys and may be trying to get back into the house. She told me she wasn't too sure. End of the conversation. At this point, I was a bit on edge. I suffer from anxiety and overthink everything. I decided I might need something to defend myself with, just in case. Having been in the process of painting my room, I had nothing but a pillow to protect myself with. I decided to have another peek out of the blinds to see what was going on. As I pulled my blinds open, I was looking straight at a young man, dressed all in gray. He looked at me, dead in my eyes, and just smiled at me. He then proceeded to walk back to the back door. At this point, I'm panicking. The banging is getting more intense, and I know that this person is trying to break in, and definitely knows I'm here now. So what do? I lock my bedroom door. Then, the banging stops. I'm thinking, okay, he's given up. Then I hear the sliding door that connects to my room roll open so slowly. My heart is in my throat. I know I'm in some form of danger. Then my bedroom door handle slowly rotates, but it's locked. Then I hear a female faintly calling my name. It's my boyfriend's sister. She's been home all along. We come out to see that this man has nearly succeeded in entering the house. The door frame is torn from the wall, and the sliding door is off the tracks. My dog hiding under the couch. We call 000 and have 2 squads to the house within 3 minutes. Anyway, he is never caught. A couple weeks later, my car number plates are stolen. My car was in the driveway of the house the day of the attempted break-in. Weeks and weeks after, I'm followed by a young man in a van. He follows me to the petrol station and makes note of stopping his car and smiling at me. He stops his car in peak hour traffic to get a glimpse of me. He was hanging around the front of my house, neighbor's house, and street for weeks following the incident. Everything was reported to the police, his registration and whatever else, but the plate was fake. Nothing ever came from this. I moved, bought a new car, and I haven't had an issue since. I have a huge fear of being home alone in general now. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. Brad Broughton, Electric Beauties, Gloria, Isabella Frank, Zero Bite, Jennifer Fuentes, Autumn Moon, Christina Callery, Nix, The Wandering Triathlete, Talara Williams, Moxed, Ro Harper, Pretty in Pink, Johnny C., Kim Thompson, Kristen Collins, Anne Sherry Smith, Felicia Tayshore, Shannon Evans, Amy Chambers, Adam Ernest, Alexander Wilson, Calamity Jade, Maureen Baumgartner, Tyson Allen, Tyler Wilson, Alexandria Bannock, It's Me, Ryan, Trevor Blockley, Cassandra Bricker Wyatt, Patty's niece, Adiara Yasharala L., Deb Foster, Kathleen Greer, Lynn Meese, Ryan, Chris Lawson, Joe Jordan, Lise Mendoza, Brooke, Nikki Bundrant, Thomas Doolittle, The Tijara, Brooke, Nikki Bundrant, Thomas Doolittle, Jennifer Chamberlain, Denise Watson, Zero Bite, Erica Asir, Forgotten Ruins TV, Night Shadow, Healing with Ev, Talisha Kluss, Donna Cox, Holy Crusader, Sheila Grant 44, Julie Hibbins, Stephanie McLaren, Janet Mills Rice, Bob Jeff, Master Dom Howie, Denise Watson, Roz, Cassandra Wyatt, Travis Smith, Zoe D., Kat Philbin, Melissa Friesen, Lorna Clark, Kathy Richmond, Natasha Hensley, Jaleesa Ferguson, Leah McBride, Emily Pearson, Tyler Wilson, Lynn Meese, Kristen Berto, Shaz, Betty Brantley, Candice Lee, Africa Winfield, Becca, Lydia Adams, Girl Veteran, Legends CBZ 69 2012, Katrina King, Hospital Cakewalk, Dirty Diana, Quinta Siegel, Shirley Porch, Taylor Ruist, Annalisa Petrie, Jasmine Davis, Janelle Jensen, Jasper Roth, Alex, Monica Levalace, James Gargano, Sarah P., Fire 05, Mad as a Felter, Tierra Sanders, Melissa Kingery, Kitty Cat Luna 2, Chelsea Moffat, Ryan, Gabrielle, Jenny, Sarah, Zep Tepe, Sarah C., Sam, Amanda Jane, Vampy Debs, October Gypsy, Rebecca, Erica B., Maribel De Luna, Lloyd Rash, Jennifer Jenkins, Kelly Townsend, Mary Wright, Tara Harris, Elizabeth Knapp, Eddie, Sean Gorman, Sue Gordon, Spider's Web, Kay, Christy, Absinthe Alice, Dina Kingery, Snowball Rathina, Lady Drackard, Brenda, Pretty Girl 215, Amber Davis, Sigma Cube X, Letitia Acklin, Ali O'Neill, Gina Eberhardt, Lilypad, Ashley Nicole, Sarah Chifalo, May 2nd, 2003, Bella Plays 2006, Skincrawler, Stephanie McLaren, Borderline Betty, Kuro, Top Off, Kelly Ann Bain, Michael O'Malley, Neil Kavanagh, The Dead Movie Society, Diana Johnston, Taya Atwell, Danielle, Possum Posse, Crafty Kel, Brooke, Scott McKenzie, Megan Abrams, Jane Wiggins, Jasmine Davis, Jack White, Your Pappy's Dilly, Emma Lisa, Tanya Ferguson, The Wendy, Ember Hops, Alexia Tuttle, Ram Beltran, Elizabeth Mayers, Unladylike 13, Pegasus Genesis, Sheila Grant 44, Sona, Scout Mom 405, Cheryl Duckworth, Ashley Bray, Angela Reeves, Kim Thompson, Brock Ballard, Nick Bigdowski, Jessica Lasley, Yennefer, Clarice Scott, Timothy Stratton, Melissa Kingery, Shane Stevens, Serge Vargas, Bart in Real Life, April Jourdanet, Lisa Prentice, Mason Hayes, Sarah Price, Jasmine Thomas, Angie Lindoff, Z. Harris, Kirby Harris, Yolo Sapien, Lavina Cordelia, Misty Racour, Michelle Green, Dixie Busby, Paula Ferreira Nieves, Samantha Place, Donna Cox, Stephen Wheeler, Melissa Moore, Deshaun Edmondson, This Bad Kitty, Gloria, Christina Myway, Connie Sue, Carol Zaffarano, Merciful Humming, Kelsa Rundle, Ashley Juster, Vicky Howell, Joe Tozer, Zoe D, Nicholas Johnson, Kimmy Love. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.